السلام عليكم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسبحان الله العلي العظيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى محمد، خاتم الرسل والأنبياء أجمعين، المرسل رحمة للعالمين، وعلى آله الأطهار الميامين، وعلى صحبه المختارين، وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. سبحان الله، سبحان الله الذي أنعم علينا بنعمة الإسلام. اللهم يا رب، إنا نتوكل عليك ونعوذ بك أن نضل أو نضل أو نزل أو نزل أو أن نظلم أو نظلم أو أن نجهل أو نستجهل. ونعوذ بك يا نور السماوات والأرض من كل شيطان رجيم، ونبتهل إليك ونتوسل إليك. اللهم اجعل لنا نورا إنك أنت العلي العظيم. There is a miraculous relationship, truly remarkable and even magical relationship between words and the beings that receive words and comprehend words, understand these words, and go beyond that to act upon words. It is really magical because without words, not only do we human beings are unable to relate to one another or exchange experiences, knowledge, feelings, but words are even the ways that we relate to our own selves. Words are a shorthand symbolism by the way that enable us even to communicate with our very selves. And the way Allah communicates with us is through the medium of words. I'm always struck by the words in the Revelation, in the Quran, and the extent to which so much depends on that agent, the human being that receives the Quran, that deciphers the linguistic symbolisms of the Quran, turning them into comprehension, into a relationship with oneself, into a relationship with others, turning the medium of words to a full universe of meaning. In Surah Taha, Allah quite simply, in the context of reminding us that although we have no frame of reference to fully understand what resurrection means, but in reminding us that it will come as surely as death will come, as surely as any of us, in the moment that we are alive, death is such a remote implausibility. In every moment of life, our intellects, our psyches, do not fully comprehend death. And even our relationship with the very word death is an endlessly complicated one. It adopts shades of meaning at different times, in different ways, in different contexts, to different effects. But Allah summarizes for us that dynamic in resurrection, that when we come to again after having gone through the experience of death, and Allah quite simply says, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ حَمِلَ ظُلْمًا. Very simple, straightforward words. You will come to your Lord, and you will stand before your Lord in one way or the other. But there will come a time where the only thing that can occupy your attention is the fact that you are standing before your Lord. At that time, that moment, there are no distractions. A distraction is not possible. In the same way, an escape is not possible. All you have is yourself, the overwhelming reality of your Lord, your Maker, the Maker of the universe. And Allah quite simply says, those who come to meet their Lord bearing an injustice, they are in a state of loss. Bearing an injustice. A human being intent on reflection and a human being intent on understanding would pause and think of the profound and humorous implications of that simple expression. When you stand before your Lord, be mindful of the fact that if you stand bearing an injustice, carrying an injustice, being burdened by an injustice, you will be in a state of loss. If words are to have meaning, you pause and you reflect on the many ways that you can be just and the many ways that you can also be unjust. How do we even begin to think about an injustice and justice? Well, at a very minimum, for justice to exist, each must receive their due. Again, words. But each must receive their due. But in order for these words to have meaning, that each must receive their due, We must be capable of thinking about rights. What is due to a party? Think about a human being and the bundle of rights and obligations that surround a human being from the time they come to this earth to the time they leave this earth. A bundle of rights that are owed, lest we forget, to your Maker. You indulge in all the bounties that Allah made available to you. Every moment of every day, for the vast majority of time, you take these bounties for granted. Everything from good health to relationships of love and trust, relationships of respect, relationships of safety and security, relationships of tranquility. It is all through Allah's bounty. If you love your mother and your mother loves you, that is not of your own doing. That's a bounty, a gift from Allah. If you love your children and your children love you, that's a gift from Allah. If you have a roof over you, if you sleep warm and fed, if you can think of tomorrow and count on tomorrow coming while you are safe and secure, all of that are blessings from the Maker, and blessings that for the most part we take for granted. We hardly think about at all. And in fact, we tend to think about them only in deprivation. After years of having a mother that loved you, cared for you, prayed for you, how much you realize the gift and the bounty when this mother is gone. How much it washes over you. All the years in which you had the blessings of this mother's company. Just the fact that you could hear her voice and hear her dua and count on the fact that she is there to pray for you, and that Allah might grant you a favor, not for your sake, but for your mother's sake. But so many days, so many years, as you've enjoyed this blessing, you take it for granted. Allah has extended it to you, and for the most part, you take it for granted. As we take for granted our ability to walk, our ability to be fed, our ability to sleep, our ability to get rid of our waste, all the numerous blessings that we take for granted. If you are able to socialize and earn people's respect, earn people's love, earn people's care instead of their scorn, instead of their hate, instead of their jealousy. These are all gifts from Allah that you take for granted. And you feel the extent of the blessing only in deprivation. When you are denied the blessing, a whole set of rights, we start understanding why truly Allah is the Rahman Rahim, is the merciful and compassionate. A God that puts forward all the blessings, all the gifts for you to enjoy, and is ever willing to receive you when you finally remember that you ought to be grateful, that will forgive you for years of obliviousness and neglect and ingratitude, just because eventually you got your act together and you started being grateful. A God that will send you numerous reminders during your lifetime, telling you, reflect, think. Don't be among those that will come to meet us in due time, being branded an unjust human being. Unjust because you've enjoyed so many blessings and expressed very little gratitude for these blessings. Gratitude is not just expressed in worship or in the expression of thanks, but gratitude is expressed in behavior. If you honor the blessings of the relationships that Allah has given you, you protect these relationships. You realize that instead of every loving relationship, it could turn to its opposite. And so you honor and you nurture every goodness that you have in your life. That is gratitude. Think of all the ways that you could also be unjust towards yourself. If Allah has given you a talent, a gift, we call it a gift because we really don't understand it. Someone that has the gift of music, where does it come from? What is the reality of this gift? Even our language calls it a gift. Even in Arabic, it's called mawhiba. Mawhiba from wahaba, a gift. If Allah has given you a gift, and the most miraculous gift is your intellect and your heart, but you failed to give this gift its due. Instead of the gift of music that you could have employed to do good, you misused this gift. And you used this gift to perpetuate ugliness instead of beauty. Or Allah gave you the gift of prose and words. Or Allah gave you the gift of being able to understand mathematics. Or the numerous gifts that are given through the intellect and through the heart. To give it its due, is to nurture it, to care for it, to develop it. If you fail to nurture and care and develop, then perhaps you will be among those who meet their Lord carrying an injustice. This injustice committed against the self. Allah has given you the gift, the right of dignity, the right to live as a human being, dignified. But if you carry yourself in an undignified fashion, if you turn yourself into the perpetual clown who accepts being mocked and laughed at and disrespected as a normal state of affairs, Allah has given you the gift of intellectual freedom and intellectual independence. If you allow yourself to end up in a relationship in which you are dominated, subjugated, oppressed, maybe you will be among those who face their Lord carrying an injustice. Beyond God and the self are all the ways that Allah taught you that as a human being, you are obligated to think of others, care for others, and serve others. And all the ways that you might have lived a selfish life, where you hardly thought of whether the needs that others have are met. A life that could have been very egocentric, meaning centered around the self, with little thought about what others enjoy or do not enjoy. Allah quite simply tells you, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ حَمِلَ ظُلْمًا. Lost, truly lost, are those that will come to meet us bearing an injustice. Words. You could choose not to take your God seriously. You could choose to read this and say, "Oh, come on. This is too much. Really? You know, I have to worry about not just making it through this life, but I have to worry about dying and then being resurrected, and whether I'm carrying an injustice." It can't be that you really mean what you say. Yeah, there's plenty of people who are willing to take this risk. But I dare tell you that this is the earmark of stupidity. Stupid people. You see, stupidity is a blight upon humanity. Stupidity is a curse. We indulge in stupidity as a pastime. Stupidity is to clearly receive the message of eviction, the notice of eviction, and say, I choose to ignore it until the day comes where I have to face eviction, but I'll worry about it then. You're going to end up homeless. I'll worry about it when it happens. Allah tells you, think carefully about the package that you will come carrying when you meet me. How many injustices are in this package? Have you honored what I've given you? Have you shown proper gratitude? Have you given me as your Lord my rights? Have you recognized the blessings that I gave you, which include your loved ones, your friends, your education, your career, everything that you relied on and enjoyed during your lifetime, and you couldn't possibly have repaid me? Have you treated all of that with the justice that it deserves? Have you been just towards yourself? Have you nurtured what I've given you? Have you preserved your own dignity and self-respect? Have you given other human beings their due? Have you lived the life of a person who is aware of the mizan, the balance, and how it presents you with an equilibrium of duties and rights? Because you are in notice, you are on notice. If you come to meet me in the hereafter, I will hold you to account for every injustice that you have been oblivious towards in your life. You see how words depend on the recipient of these words. Such a simple phrase could mean everything, could transform nations and people, could transform you, or it could mean absolutely nothing. You could choose to pay attention, and instantaneously, your whole outlook upon life would become, God, please help me not to meet you while carrying an injustice. Or you could do, as the vast majority of Muslims do, in most of the time in our age, and that is choose not to pay attention at all, to recite it in prayer, or recite it in any context, and simply move on. But I ask you to think with the attitude of moving on when it comes to the words of our Lord. When it comes to the words of God, the way we have become in the habit of moving on, where it has left us, where have we ended up? What have become of the people who were supposed to bear witness on behalf of God for the sake of justice? أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم أسأل الله يستجب لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسبحان الله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعوا بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. You know, it doesn't take a great deal of intelligence to see the way that Muslims in this day and age have truly become the paragon, the example of people who are unjust towards themselves. Recently, there has been an overlapping set of circumstances that speak volumes about where this ummah ought to head and where this ummah must reform and clean its act. I was struck, of course, all of you know about the World Cup in soccer. And in news item, when Morocco won its games that allowed it to rise to the quarterfinals or semifinals, whatever it is, I was struck by a news story that Palestinians celebrating Morocco's victory over Portugal were attacked by Israeli police. Quite a few people injured and arrested. And Israeli police attacked them because they didn't like the appearance of Arab solidarity. They didn't like the sense that these Palestinians are finding some degree of fulfillment in the victory of an Arab team over a European team. But meanwhile, as Israeli forces, as the story read, Israeli forces crack down on Palestinians celebrating Morocco's victory. This is at the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem. Another news item: the Biden administration celebrates, or the Biden administration congratulates the new Likud government, the most racist and religiously fanatic government to date in Israel, congratulates this government for winning the elections and reaffirms the deep ties that connect the US and Israel. This is a government that is coming to power that is undeniably racist. A government that has as much as 30% of individuals who have made a history of describing the Palestinians as nothing more than animals, calling Arabs in general contaminant in Israeli society, openly calling for a genocide against Palestinians and the expulsion of Palestinians en masse. The ideology adopted by so many members of this coming Israeli government clearly conflicts even with the American immigration code that says that if you played a part in the persecution of others or advocate the persecution of others, you are not allowed to enter the United States. Well, a core alliance of this coming government are people who've made a career of persecuting Palestinians and calling for the persecution of Palestinians. And our government openly congratulated them and reassured them, regardless of how religiously fanatic you are, regardless of political Judaism, regardless of what type of extremism, the ties between us and you are unbreakable. But it didn't stop there. As Israeli forces attacked Palestinians, celebrating Morocco's victory, the US announces the first ever Abraham Accords for sports peace games in hopes of bolstering normalization. What these are, for the first time ever, the US announces games in which Israelis, Moroccans, Bahrainis, Emiratis are to participate. So just yesterday, Israel again, and it happens now every week, and we hardly even notice. Israel again kills Palestinian children. Yet again, more Palestinians are shot dead. An article just published, what was her name? Agony as Palestine mourns another child killed by Israel. Israel shot a 15-year-old girl that was found dead on a rooftop, riddled with bullets. So, you can't celebrate as Palestinians. You're not allowed to celebrate. We can kill you at will whenever we want. We slaughter your children whenever we want. You are expected to put your quote-unquote religious extremists in prison, to jail them up. We put our religious extremists in government. The United States will act as if Islamic religious extremism is the biggest danger to the world, and will create a center in Riyadh to track Islamic movements and jail anyone that is part of quote-unquote political Islam. But political Judaism, welcome to the government and welcome to the United States. In fact, in a very important article, Chris Hedges wrote, Israel and the Rise of Jewish Fascism. In this article, Chris Hedges says, Alon Pinkas, writing in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, calls the coming coalition of government in Israel that is scheduled to take power in a couple of weeks a government by the worst and least suitable collection of ultra-nationalists, Jewish supremacists, anti-democrats, racists, bigots, homophobes, misogynists, corrupt and allegedly corrupt politicians, a ruling coalition of 64 lawmakers, of whom 32 are ultra-Orthodox or religious Zionists. Itamar Ben-Gvir, this is the fellow that was hotly and warmly welcomed by the Emirati ambassador. Itamar Ben-Gvir from the ultra-nationalist Otzma Yehudit Jewish Power Party is going to be the new minister for internal security. Otzma Yehudit is populated with members of Rabbi Meir Kahan's Cash Party, which was banned from running for the Knesset in 1988 for espousing a Nazi-like ideology that included advocating the ethnic cleansing of all Palestinian citizens from Israel, as well as Palestinians living under Israeli military occupation. His appointment, along with that of other far-right ideologues, including Bezalel Smotrich, to be in charge of the occupied Palestinian territories, effectively jettisons the old tropes liberal Zionists used to defend Israel, that it is the only democracy in the Middle East, that it seeks a peaceful settlement with Palestinians in its two-state solution, that extremism and racism have no place in Israeli society, and that Israel must impose draconian forms of control on the Palestinians to prevent terrorism. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich represent the dregs of Israeli society, one that promotes Jewish identity and Jewish nationalism in a Zionist version of fascism's call for blood and soil. The article goes on to talk about how Netanyahu's partners in power that are coming to power in Israel have for long been calling for the destruction of the Aqsa Mosque, for an open genocide against Palestinians, for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Despite an undeniable track record of fascism, bigotry, and hate, the Emirat, that has a ministry of tolerance, has it said one word of criticism against the intolerance of this new Israeli government? None. None whatsoever. Has Egypt expressed any type of concern over the fate of what Chris Hedges, and I agree with him, predicts that the first thing this new coalition will do is create an excuse to wage a war against Gaza? They're human beings. We live our lives and we will meet our Lord, and Allah will ask us, what is this injustice that you are carrying? And you know, one of the worst injustices is for a Muslim to live happy and content while Muslim children who are just like you live in indescribable suffering and agony. One of the first things that this Israeli government will do, as Chris Hedges argues, and I agree with him, will find an excuse to attack Gaza, to level Gaza to the ground. Israel has killed more Palestinians this year since 2005, when the UN started keeping records of how many Palestinians are killed by Israelis. This has been the highest number. So, bear with me. Israel elects the most radical government, the most fascist government to date. A government that has always been talking about Palestinians as nothing better than animals, using the most racist language to describe Palestinians and Arabs generally. So the Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco rush to make peace with Israel. Israel responds to this by electing the most radical and fascist government, the most hateful government. The writing on the wall is clear. Regardless of what the Emiratis say, or what the Saudis say, or what the Bahrainis say, or what the Moroccans say, Israel is reading these agreements, add to this Sudan and Egypt, as fundamentally an abandonment of Palestinians. As fundamentally, we can persecute Palestinians for even experiencing the joy of a victory in soccer, and turn around and offer these other Muslim Arabs a US-sponsored sports activity, sports event. At the same time that the most racist government is coming to power in Israel, the United States turns around, the Biden administration, and firms up plans started by the Trump administration to build the new American embassy on stolen Palestinian land in Jerusalem. An article that documents undeniably that the land upon which the new American embassy will be built is stolen Palestinian land. But it doesn't even stop there. The US, at the same time, goes to the UN and tries to pressure the UN to terminate its blacklist of companies that are illegally doing business in occupied Palestinian lands. The United States goes to the UN and says, we don't like the fact that you continue blacklisting companies that are illegally doing business in occupied Palestinian territories. We want you to treat these companies like we treat ourselves. These companies might do business on stolen Palestinian land, and we want you, the United Nations, to completely ignore that. Like we are ignoring the fact that we are building our embassy on stolen Palestinian land. But the creme of the creme is Netanyahu shows up on Saudi TV to deliver a message to Saudis of the wonderful days of peace between Israelis and Saudis to come. At the same time that his partners in power are openly calling for the destruction of the Aqsa Mosque and openly saying that any Palestinian that resists Israeli occupation will be summarily deported. Netanyahu is allowed to appear on Saudi TV. And part of what is amazing about his message is that he urges the United States not, for any reason whatsoever, to punish Saudi Arabia for its criminal conduct or for its human rights violations. In other words, to rubber stamp whatever Mohammed bin Salman does. It is clear that all these so-called Muslim Arab governments see that the way to DC's heart, to America's heart, is through Israel. The Emirat, Bahrain, Saudi, Sudan, Egypt, Morocco. Forget all the nonsense that you've learned about realpolitik and pragmatism. We don't live in a pragmatic world. We live in a highly ideological world. Because the United States itself is not looking to its best interests. The United States is on a purely ideological mission. We will sacrifice our numerous financial interests, even our principles, as long as it is for the sake of our ideological partner, Israel. And as long as Israel is happy with you, we will overlook everything else, even overlook a racist, fascist, genocidal regime coming to power. Now, I go back to the same thing. When that genocide comes in the next few years, and actually in as soon as by next Ramadan, not even few years, few months, when this new government starts ethnically cleansing Palestinians, when this new government commits unprecedented crimes against Palestinians, and when the Emiratis, who sit there and advocate, say we have a ministry of tolerance, headed by a rapist, by the way, do absolutely nothing. And when the Saudis, the custodians of the two holy sites, do absolutely nothing, and when the American government pretends to be outraged by the violence, but has effectively encouraged Israel in every possible way, when all of that happens, think of your role as an American Muslim. Have your flat, polite talk about always supporting the rights of Palestinians. Do these flat statements discharge your obligations and duties? When you continued to praise and celebrate those who are closely allied to the Emirat and to Emirati money and to Saudi money. Think of the day when you stand before your Lord and the bundle of rights and obligations that you will be held responsible for. You've been warned. Chris Hedges warned you. And I am warning you. By next Ramadan, we will be hearing of a massacre and a genocide and an ethnic cleansing against Palestinians. Have you as much as have done something even in your heart, even in the choice of what you listen to or follow on social media? Even have you done something in terms of your tweets, in terms of your most minimal activity? Have you done anything whatsoever, at least to tell Allah, as little as what I've done, here's something? Or do you continue to be oblivious, ignorant, mindless, stupid, like all those who recite, read, or see, truly are at a loss, those who appear before their Lord bearing an injustice? Allahumma afu anna, Allahumma aghfir lana, Allahumma arhamna, Allahumma tub alayna ya tawwab ya rahman ya rahim. Allah forgive our sins. Allah guide us to the straight path. Allah inspire us to be better Muslims, not to be unjust, to be people of justice, so that when we meet you as just people, not as unjust people. Ya Allah, Ya Ali, Ya Azim, wa salli wa sallim wa barik ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa al-muttaba'u min as-salihin wa aqim as-salah.